People like you don't fly first class with real tickets.
Sir, please
This
calm down.
boarding
I'm doing my
pass
best to
is
assist you.
fake. Derek Walsh's voice cut through the Christmas Eve chaos at Gate B12 like a knife through wrapping paper. He held Dr. Simone Brooks's boarding pass between two fingers, like evidence of a crime, waving it high enough for the entire terminal to see. The harsh fluorescent lights caught the contempt in his eyes as he stared down at the African-American woman standing calmly before him. What he didn't know was that the woman he just humiliated was married to one of the FAA's most feared investigators,
Sir, please calm
and Michael
down. I'm doing my
Brooks
best to assist you.
was already in the building. In exactly 15 minutes, Derek's world would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. The gate area buzzed with holiday travelers clutching coffee cups and dragging overstuffed carry-ons. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, twinkling lights trying to add cheer to the sterile airport environment. Children pressed their faces against the massive windows, watching planes taxi through the December snow. Families huddled together, checking departure boards with the anxious energy of people desperate to get home for Christmas. But all eyes were now turning toward Gate B12, where Derek Walsh stood like a self-appointed judge and jury, his supervisor badge gleaming under the terminal lights. His voice had carried far enough to pull attention away from smartphones and holiday conversations. Passengers craned their necks, sensing drama unfolding. Before we dive into this Christmas Eve nightmare that changed everything, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves basic human respect, especially during the holidays, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this story, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith that justice still exists. Dr. Simone Brooks stood perfectly still in the eye of this brewing storm. Her shoulders squared. Her breathing controlled, her dark eyes focused with the precision of someone trained to perform surgery under pressure. She wore a black wool coat over comfortable jeans and a cream sweater, her designer handbag a subtle sign of success that Derek had clearly noticed and resented. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand to speak to a manager. She simply looked Derek Walsh directly in the eye and said, "I am Dr. Simone Brooks. This is my ticket. I'm going home to spend Christmas with my family." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's mouth twisted into a smirk that had probably ruined countless travelers' days. Anyone can claim to be a doctor, lady, and anyone can Photoshop a boarding pass. But I can spot a fake from a mile away. Behind him, Carmen Rodriguez shifted nervously at her gate podium, sensing the confrontation escalating beyond normal passenger complaints. Other travelers began pulling out phones, the modern reflex when witnessing potential viral content. Nobody in that gate area knew they were about to witness one of the most spectacular examples of instant karma ever caught on camera. The kind of justice that would make headlines and change policies. The kind of story that reminds us all that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. 2 hours earlier, Dr. Simone Brooks had walked out of the Palmer House Hilton with the satisfied exhaustion that comes after delivering 3 days of groundbreaking presentations. The International Neurological Surgery Conference had been her most successful yet. Her research on spinal cord injury recovery had earned standing ovations and partnership offers from hospitals across the country. But right now, all she wanted was home. Home was Washington, D.C. Home was her quiet street in Arlington where Christmas lights twinkled from every window. Home was her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who had probably spent the last 3 days driving the babysitter crazy with questions about when Mommy would return. And most importantly, home was Christmas morning with her husband, Michael, watching Emma's face light up as she discovered what Santa had brought. Simone's phone buzzed as she settled into the taxi heading to O'Hare. A text from Michael made her smile despite her fatigue. "Flight on time. Emma has been asking every hour when you'll be home. She's convinced Santa won't come until the whole family is together. Also, I may have bought too many presents. The living room looks like Toys R Us exploded." Simone typed back quickly. Boarding in an hour. Tell Emma to get some sleep or Santa might skip our house entirely. And yes, you definitely bought too many presents. Love you. Love you more. Safe travels, Dr. Brooks. The formal address made her grin. Even after 12 years of marriage, Michael still used her title when he was particularly proud of her accomplishments. He'd probably seen the conference highlights on the medical news feeds he monitored as part of his job with the Federal Aviation Administration. At O'Hare, Simone navigated through the Christmas Eve madness with practiced efficiency. The security line moved slowly, filled with families juggling presents wrapped in TSA-approved clear bags. The officer scanning her boarding pass barely glanced at her face before waving her through. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. Her first-class seat had been a small gift to herself. Seat 3A window side, purchased 3 months ago with her own frequent flyer miles accumulated from years of medical conferences. After 3 days of hotel beds and conference room lighting, she was looking forward to a comfortable flight and maybe even a short nap before landing. The boarding pass displayed perfectly on her phone screen, Dr. Simone Brooks, Flight 447, Chicago to Washington, D.C.A. Seat 3A, First Class, confirmation number JH8945. Everything exactly as it should be. She grabbed a quick coffee from the Starbucks near her gate, then checked her watch. Boarding would begin in 20 minutes. Perfect timing. As she walked toward Gate B12, Simone noticed the area was more crowded than usual. Christmas Eve flights were always packed with people desperate to get home for the holidays. She saw families with young children, business travelers typing frantically on laptops, elderly couples holding hands and checking their watches nervously. At the gate podium, she noticed 2 employees preparing for boarding. A young Hispanic woman named Carmen Rodriguez was organizing boarding passes and checking her computer screen. Behind her stood Derek Walsh, whose supervisor badge and self-important posture immediately caught Simone's attention. Derek was the type of airport employee she'd encountered before. Mid-40s, thinning blonde hair, the kind of man who treated every minor authority as if it were life-or-death power. She'd seen dozens like him over the years, people who used their positions to make travelers' lives difficult simply because they could. But Simone had flown hundreds of thousands of miles. She knew the system knew her rights and knew how to handle difficult situations with grace and professionalism. She'd never had a problem that couldn't be resolved with patience and clear communication. As she settled into a seat near the gate, Simone reviewed her boarding pass one more time. Everything was correct. Her phone battery was fully charged. Her ID was easily accessible. She had her confirmation email saved offline just in case of technical difficulties. The gate area continued filling with passengers. She noticed a young college student with his phone constantly in hand, the telltale sign of someone documenting every moment for social media. An older woman in an expensive tracksuit was complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about the delayed arrival of her earlier connection. Simone checked the departure board. Flight 447 was on time. Boarding would begin soon. She had no idea that in less than an hour, her quiet Christmas Eve flight would become a viral video watched by millions of people. She had no idea that Derek Walsh was about to make the worst mistake of his professional life, and she certainly had no idea that her husband Michael was already in the building, arriving early for his own flight scheduled 2 hours later. All Simone Brooks wanted was to go home for Christmas. But sometimes the universe has other plans. First-class passengers were now boarding Flight 447 to Washington, D.C.A. First-class passengers, only please. Carmen Rodriguez's voice echoed through the gate area as she activated the boarding scanner. The red velvet rope was lifted, and a small group of passengers began forming a line. Simone gathered her belongings, double-checked her phone screen showing her boarding pass, and walked confidently toward the podium. She was the third person in line behind a businessman in an expensive suit and an elderly woman wearing diamond earrings. Both were waved through with polite smiles and welcome aboard greetings from Carmen. Simone stepped forward and held out her phone, the boarding pass QR code clearly visible on the bright screen. "Good evening," she said pleasantly. Carmen scanned the phone. The scanner emitted a sharp negative beep. "Oh," Carmen frowned at her computer screen. "Let me try that again." She scanned the phone a second time. Another negative beep. Simone felt a familiar flutter of travel anxiety. Technical glitches at airports were common, usually resolved quickly with a few keystrokes or a supervisor's override. Nothing to worry about. "Is there an issue?" Simone asked calmly. "It's not reading your seat assignment." Carmen's voice was apologetic but professional. "Let me type in your information manually. What's your confirmation number? JH8945, Dr. Simone Brooks, seat 3A. Carmen typed carefully, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. Her frown deepened as she stared at the screen. Behind Simone, more first-class passengers were gathering, checking their watches and shifting impatiently. She could feel their eyes on her back, the weight of inconvenienced travelers who just wanted to board and settle in. "I'm sorry," Carmen said quietly. "I'm not seeing you in the system. Let me call my supervisor." That was when Derek Walsh materialized beside the podium like a shark sensing blood in the water. "What's the holdup, Carmen?" "We're running behind schedule." Derek Walsh was 48 years old and had been a gate supervisor for 6 years. In that time, he had developed a particular talent for spotting what he called problem passengers. In his mind, these were travelers who tried to scam their way into better seats, use expired vouchers, or claim privileges they didn't deserve. And standing in front of him now was exactly the type of passenger who raised his suspicions. "This passenger's ticket isn't validating." Carmen explained, her voice lower now that her supervisor was involved. Derek's eyes swept over Simone, taking in her appearance with the practiced assessment of someone looking for reasons to be suspicious. African-American woman, well-dressed, but not flashy first-class ticket, traveling alone. In Derek's biased worldview, these factors added up to potential fraud. "Let me see that phone," Derek said, extending his hand. Simone handed over her device without hesitation. She had nothing to hide. Derek squinted at the screen, holding the phone close to his face as if searching for evidence of digital manipulation. "This is the Global Airways app." "Yes, of course it is." "You can see the flight number right there. GA447. Derek's tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. A lot of things can look real these days. Technology makes it easy to fake documents. "Excuse me." Simone's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Are you suggesting my boarding pass isn't legitimate?" Derek handed the phone back to her with exaggerated care, as if it might contaminate him. "I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am. I'm telling you that this ticket isn't in our system." He turned to his computer terminal and began typing Simone's information. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, like someone already convinced of what they would find. "Let's see here. Dr. Simone Brooks, confirmation, JH8945, seat 3A. Derek's voice grew louder, ensuring the growing line of passengers could hear every word. "That's interesting." "What's interesting?" Simone asked. "According to our system, seat 3A belongs to a Mr. James Patterson, and Dr. Simone Brooks isn't on this flight at all. Not in first class, not in business class, not anywhere." The words hit the gate area like a thunderclap. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The businessman who had boarded successfully was now watching through the jetway window. The elderly woman with diamond earrings had paused halfway down the ramp. Simone felt heat rising in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "That's impossible. I checked in this morning online. I selected my seat. I received a confirmation email." Ma'am, Derek said, his voice dripping with false patience. "I understand this is disappointing, but I can only go by what's in our official system. And you're not in it." "Then there's an error in your system," Simone replied firmly. "I have traveled with this airline for over 15 years. I'm a Platinum Elite member. Here's my frequent flyer number." She began pulling up her airline profile on her phone, but Derek held up a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, please. I don't have time to look at screenshots that can be easily manipulated. The fact is, you don't have a valid ticket for this flight." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers were now openly staring, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a confrontation. Carmen Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably beside Derek. She had been trained to handle ticketing issues with diplomacy and problem-solving. This felt different. This felt wrong. "Could we call the ticketing office?" Carmen suggested quietly. "Maybe they can verify the reservation." Derek shot her a look that could have frozen water. "Carmen, I don't need the ticketing office to tell me how to read our computer system. This passenger doesn't have a ticket. Period." He turned back to Simone with the expression of someone who had caught a shoplifter red-handed. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside so I can board the passengers with valid tickets. Once everyone else is seated, we can discuss your situation with airport customer service." "My situation." Simone's composure began to crack. "My situation is that I have a confirmed paid reservation and you're refusing to honor it." "Your situation," Derek replied, his voice growing harder, "is that you're holding up a flight full of people who actually belong on this plane." The words "actually belong" hit like a slap. Around the gate area, some passengers nodded in agreement with Derek's assessment. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. A few continued recording on their phones. In seat 3A, Mr. James Patterson was settling in with a scotch and soda, completely unaware that his presence was being used to justify what was about to become a viral example of discrimination caught on camera. "I want to speak to your manager, Simone," said her voice still controlled, but carrying an edge of steel that Derek was too arrogant to recognize as dangerous. "I am the manager," Derek replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. "And I'm telling you that this ticket is not valid." Derek Walsh turned away from Simone and addressed the growing line of first-class passengers with the theatrical flair of someone enjoying an audience. "Folks, I sincerely apologize for this delay. We have a situation here with an invalid ticket, but we'll get it sorted out quickly so you can all board and get home for Christmas." His voice carried across the gate area, ensuring that everyone within a 50-foot radius could hear every word. Passengers in the economy boarding area turned their heads. Families gathered around nearby gates paused their conversations to watch the drama unfolding. "Invalid ticket." Simone repeated, her voice rising just enough to carry authority without losing control. "This ticket was purchased 3 months ago with my own frequent flyer miles. I have the receipt, the confirmation email, and the boarding pass generated by your own system." Derek's smirk widened. "Ma'am, anyone can mock up an email. Anyone can screenshot a fake boarding pass. But what I'm looking at here," he tapped his computer screen dramatically, "is the official airline manifest. And you're not on it." A woman in an expensive pink tracksuit near the front of the economy line spoke up loudly enough for others to hear. "Some people will try anything to get a free upgrade these days." Her name was Barbara Stevens, and she would later discover that speaking without thinking can have consequences that last far longer than a single flight. "This is ridiculous," Barbara continued, adjusting her designer handbag. "Just move her aside and let the real passengers board. It's Christmas Eve, for crying out loud." Derek nodded approvingly at Barbara's comment. "Exactly. We have paying customers who want to get home to their families." "I am a paying customer," Simone said firmly. "And I want to get home to my family, too." "Then you should have bought a real ticket," Derek replied, his voice dripping with condescension. That was the moment Jake Thompson realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Jake was 19 years old, a sophomore at Northwestern University, heading home to Virginia for Christmas break. He had grown up online, instinctively documenting every interesting moment for TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. But this felt different. This felt important. He quietly activated his phone's camera and began live streaming. "Y'all," he whispered into his phone, "I'm sitting here at O'Hare watching this gate agent absolutely destroy this black woman's Christmas Eve. She's got a first-class ticket and he's claiming it's fake. This is about to get real." The live stream counter showed 12 viewers, then 23, then 48. Jake's followers were logging on, drawn by the promise of unfolding drama. Derek, meanwhile, was warming to his role as airport authority figure. "Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 6 years. I've seen every scam in the book. Fake boarding passes, stolen credit cards, identity theft. You wouldn't believe what people try to get away with. Are you accusing me of identity theft?" Simone's voice remained level, but anyone with experience reading people could hear the danger underneath. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Derek replied with false innocence. "I'm just explaining why our security protocols exist, to protect legitimate passengers from fraud." Carmen Rodriguez watched this exchange with growing discomfort. She had been trained to de-escalate conflicts, not inflame them. But Derek was her supervisor, and challenging him publicly could cost her job. "Mr. Walsh." Carmen said quietly, "Maybe we could call the customer service desk. They might have access to different reservation records." Derek turned on her with barely contained irritation. "Carmen, I appreciate your input, but I know how to handle this situation. This woman is not on our manifest. End of story." He turned back to Simone with renewed authority. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some additional identification. Driver's license, credit card used for purchase, anything that proves you are who you say you are." Additional identification. Simone pulled out her wallet and extracted her driver's license. "Here's my ID. Dr. Simone Brooks, Arlington, Virginia." Derek examined the license like a bouncer checking a fake ID at a nightclub. This could be fake too. It's a Virginia state driver's license with security features. Technology these days, you can fake anything. Derek handed the license back dismissively. "I'm going to need to see the credit card you used to purchase this alleged ticket." Simone's patience was wearing thin, but she maintained her composure. "I used frequent flyer miles. No credit card was involved." "Convenient," Derek said with a knowing nod. "Very convenient. No paper trail, no credit card verification, just a claim that you used miles from an account we can't verify." The passengers in line were getting restless. Some sided with Derek, muttering about people trying to scam their way into better seats. Others looked uncomfortable with the spectacle, but remained silent. Barbara Stevens wasn't finished contributing her opinions. "I've seen this before," she announced loudly. "People hang around airports looking for opportunities. They probably saw someone drop their phone and decided to try boarding with their ticket." Derek nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly the kind of thing we have to watch for. Identity theft is a serious problem in airports. Identity theft." Simone's voice finally carried a note of incredulity. "You think I stole someone's identity to fly to Washington on Christmas Eve, I think?" Derek said slowly, enjoying every word, "that you don't have a legitimate ticket for this flight. And until you can prove otherwise, you're not boarding my aircraft." Jake Thompson's live stream now had over 200 viewers, and the comments were flooding in faster than he could read them. "This is straight-up discrimination. She's obviously a doctor. Look at how she carries herself. That gate agent is power-tripping hard. Someone needs to call the manager. This is about to go viral." Tommy Martinez was watching from his position near the jetway door. As a baggage handler, he had no official role in passenger boarding, but he had worked at O'Hare long enough to recognize trouble when he saw it. Tommy was 22 years old, the son of immigrants who had taught him to work hard, keep his head down, and avoid confrontation. But what he was witnessing made his stomach turn. He had seen Derek treat other passengers poorly, always minorities, always when no supervisors were around to observe. "This isn't right," Tommy muttered to himself, but loud enough for Carmen to hear. Carmen glanced at him nervously. She was thinking the same thing, but speaking up could end her career. Derek, oblivious to the growing number of phones recording his performance, decided to escalate further. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step completely away from the boarding area. You're disrupting the travel of legitimate passengers." "Legitimate passengers?" Simone repeated, her voice deadly quiet. "People with real tickets," Derek clarified as if speaking to a child. "People who actually belong in first class." The phrase "actually belong" would be replayed millions of times in the coming days. It would be dissected by legal experts, civil rights advocates, and social media commentators. But in that moment, standing at gate B12 on Christmas Eve, it was simply the sound of a man revealing exactly who he was when he thought he held all the power. Derek Walsh basked in what he perceived as his moment of authority. Around the gate area, he had an audience of travelers, a smartphone-wielding generation ready to witness his handling of what he convinced himself was a clear case of ticket fraud. Ma'am, Derek continued, his voice growing louder and more theatrical. "I need you to understand something. This isn't personal. This is about the safety and security of every passenger on this aircraft. Safety and security." Simone replied, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. "How exactly does my valid boarding pass threaten anyone's safety?" Derek moved to his computer terminal with exaggerated purpose, his fingers dancing across the keyboard like a detective unveiling evidence in a courtroom drama. "Let me show you something," he announced to both Simone and the growing crowd of onlookers. "When I search for your confirmation number JH8945 in our system, you know what comes up." He paused for dramatic effect, ensuring every eye was on him. Nothing. Zero. No record of any transaction, no record of any ticket purchased, no record of any Dr. Simone Brooks on any flight today. Simone stepped closer to the counter. "That's impossible. Let me see your screen." "Ma'am, I can't let passengers access airline computer systems." "That's confidential information." Derek's tone suggested she had just asked to fly the plane herself. "I'm not asking to access anything. I'm asking you to verify the information that clearly shows my reservation." Derek shook his head with exaggerated patience. "What I'm trying to explain to you is that there is no reservation to verify. You're asking me to prove that something exists when our official records show it doesn't exist." Carmen Rodriguez watched this exchange with growing unease. She had been trained to handle ticketing discrepancies by calling customer service, checking backup systems, or contacting the airline's main reservation center. Derek was doing none of those things. "Mr. Walsh," Carmen said quietly, "shouldn't we call the customer service desk? They have access to different databases." Derek turned on her with barely contained irritation. "Carmen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've been doing this job since before you were born. I know how to read a computer system." He turned back to Simone with renewed authority. "Ma'am, I'm going to explain this one more time. Our official manifest shows that Seat 3A belongs to Mr. James Patterson of Chicago, Illinois. He checked in this morning, he's already boarded, and he's sitting in that seat right now. Then check Seat 3B, 3C. Any seat in first class?" Simone replied. "My reservation could have been moved. I've checked every seat in first class, every seat in business class, every seat in economy. Dr. Simone Brooks is not on this aircraft." The certainty in Derek's voice was convincing enough that some passengers began nodding in agreement. Here was an airline professional clearly knowledgeable about airline systems explaining why this woman's ticket was fraudulent. Barbara Stevens felt vindicated in her earlier assessment. "I knew it," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "You can always tell when someone doesn't belong." Jake Thompson's live stream now had over 500 viewers, and the comments were split between supporters of each side. "She seems legit. Why won't he check other systems? Gate agent knows his job. If she's not in the system, she's not supposed to be there." This is racial profiling, pure and simple. Some people will try anything for a free upgrade. Derek noticed the phones recording and decided to use them to his advantage. Folks, I want you all to understand what's happening here. This is exactly why we have security protocols. People try to board aircraft with fraudulent documents every single day. He gestured toward Simone like a prosecutor presenting evidence. This woman is claiming to have a first-class ticket purchased with frequent flyer miles, but she can't provide any credit card verification, any paper trail, or any proof that she actually purchased anything. Because I used miles from my frequent flyer account? Simone repeated, her voice strained with frustration. I can show you my elite status, my flight history, my account activity. Ma'am, anyone can create a fake frequent flyer account online. Anyone can Photoshop account statements. What I need is verification through our official airline systems. Derek turned back to his computer with the confidence of someone who knew he held all the cards. Let me check something else. His fingers moved across the keyboard again, and his expression shifted to one of supposed discovery. This is very interesting, he announced. When I search for recent security breaches in our reservation system, there was a data incident last month where passenger information may have been compromised. This was completely fabricated, but Derek delivered it with the authority of someone citing official airline policy. Data incident. Simone's voice carried a note of disbelief. You're suggesting my ticket is connected to some kind of data breach. I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am. I'm explaining why we have to be extra careful about passengers who can't provide proper verification of their ticket purchases. Carmen Rodriguez knew this was wrong. She had worked for Global Airways for 3 years and had never heard of any recent data breaches. But Derek was her supervisor, and contradicting him in front of passengers could end her career. Tommy Martinez, however, had heard enough. As a baggage handler, he wasn't part of the gate operations, but he had worked around Derek long enough to know this wasn't standard procedure. That's not right, Tommy said, stepping closer to the gate podium. We weren't briefed about any data breach. Derek whirled on him with fury. Tommy, you're baggage handling. You don't get briefed on passenger security protocols. Get back to your position. But Mr. Walsh, I've never heard you mention any data breach before. That's because it's classified information that only supervisors are cleared to handle. Now get back to work before I write you up for interfering with passenger operations. Tommy reluctantly stepped back, but he pulled out his own phone and began recording. Something was very wrong here, and he wanted documentation. Derek returned his attention to Simone with renewed aggression. Ma'am, based on the combination of factors I've observed, your ticket appears to be connected to fraudulent activity. I'm going to have to confiscate your boarding pass and ID while we sort this out. Confiscate my ID. Simone's voice carried genuine shock. You have no authority to confiscate my government-issued identification. Ma'am, when dealing with potential fraud and identity theft, airline personnel have broad authority to detain suspicious documents until proper verification can be completed. This was also completely false, but Derek delivered it with such confidence that most passengers believed they were witnessing legitimate security procedures. This is harassment, Simone said, her voice finally carrying the anger she had been suppressing. You are refusing to check alternative systems, refusing to call customer service, and now threatening to confiscate my legal identification based on fabricated policies. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that was still audible to the nearby passengers. Ma'am, I strongly recommend you cooperate with airline security procedures. Resisting these protocols could result in federal charges. The threat of federal charges sent a ripple through the gate area. Federal charges were serious. Most passengers had no idea whether Derek had the authority to pursue such charges, but they didn't want to find out. Jake Thompson's live stream viewer count hit 1,000, and the comments were exploding. Someone needs to call the cops on this gate agent. She should just leave and catch another flight. This is what happens when you try to scam airlines. Where's a manager when you need one? This is about to blow up. Derek reached across the counter toward Simone's phone where her boarding pass was still displayed. "I'm going to need to take possession of this fraudulent document." That's when Simone stepped back and said the words that would echo through millions of social media shares in the coming hours. "You will not touch my phone. You will not confiscate my identification. And you will not threaten me with federal charges for having a legitimate airplane ticket." Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years making life-and-death decisions in operating rooms. Derek Walsh was about to discover that Dr. Simone Brooks was not the kind of person who backed down from bullies. Derek Walsh's face flushed red at Simone's defiance. In his 6 years as a gate supervisor, passengers had always eventually backed down when faced with his authority. They might complain, they might demand managers, but they ultimately accepted his decisions rather than risk missing their flights. But Dr. Simone Brooks wasn't backing down. She was standing her ground with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. "Ma'am," Derek said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "you need to understand that I have the full authority of Global Airways behind me. When I tell you that this boarding pass is fraudulent, that's not an opinion. That's an official determination, based on what evidence Simone shot back. You've refused to check alternative systems. You've refused to call customer service. You've made up stories about data breaches and security protocols. Your official determination is based on nothing but your own bias." The word bias hung in the air like an accusation that cut too close to the truth. Derek's jaw tightened and several passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some were beginning to question whether they were witnessing legitimate security procedures or something far more troubling. Jake Thompson's live stream had exploded to nearly 2,000 viewers as his followers shared the feed across multiple platforms. The comments were coming too fast to read, but the tone was unmistakable. People were angry. "Y'all, this is insane," Jake whispered into his phone. "This gate agent just accused this woman of bias, and you can see in his face that she hit a nerve. This is about to get really ugly." Derek stepped out from behind the gate podium and moved closer to Simone, using his height and position to intimidate. "Ma'am, I'm going to say this once more, and I need you to listen very carefully. You do not have a valid ticket for this flight. You are currently trespassing in a secure area of the airport. And if you continue to resist our security protocols, I will have no choice but to call airport police." "Call them," Simone said without hesitation. "Call airport police right now. I want them to see how Global Airways treats paying customers." Derek hadn't expected this response. Most passengers were terrified at the mention of airport police, knowing that any involvement with law enforcement could result in missed flights, no-fly lists, or worse. But Simone was calling his bluff. "You want me to call the police?" Derek's voice carried disbelief. "I insist that you call the police," Simone replied. "I want them to witness your refusal to verify my legitimate reservation through proper channels. I want them to see your false claims about data breaches and security protocols, and I want them to document your threats against a passenger whose only crime was purchasing a first-class ticket while black." The explicit reference to race sent shockwaves through the gate area. Some passengers gasped. Others pulled out their phones to start recording. A few looked around nervously as if they had stumbled into a situation far beyond their comfort zone. Derek's face went from red to purple. "Ma'am, you are way out of line. This has nothing to do with race. This is about airline security and passenger safety." "Then prove it," Simone challenged. "Call your customer service department right now. Have them verify my reservation. Show these passengers that your computer system is working properly and that Dr. Simone Brooks genuinely doesn't have a ticket for this flight." Derek realized he was trapped. He had claimed multiple times that Simone wasn't in any airline system, but calling customer service would expose that lie. A simple verification call would show that Simone's ticket was legitimate, and that he had been either incompetent or deliberately obstructive. "I don't need customer service to tell me how to read my own computer system," Derek said, his voice defensive now. then you won't mind calling them to confirm what you're claiming Simone pressed. Unless, of course, you know that call would prove you're wrong. Carmen Rodriguez had been watching this exchange with growing horror. She knew Derek was lying about the computer system. She had seen him deliberately skip the proper verification procedures that every gate agent was trained to follow. But speaking up would mean challenging a supervisor in front of dozens of passengers and multiple recording devices. Tommy Martinez, however, had had enough. He stepped forward again despite Derek's earlier warnings. "Mr. Walsh, I've worked here for 4 years. I've never seen you skip the customer service verification call when there's a ticket problem. Why aren't you following standard procedures?" Derek whirled on Tommy with fury. "I warned you to stay out of this, Martinez. You're way outside your job description. My job description includes passenger safety," Tommy replied, standing his ground. "And what I'm seeing here isn't safe. It's wrong." "Tommy, you're fired," Derek snapped. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building." The casual destruction of Tommy's livelihood sent another shockwave through the crowd. Passengers were now witnessing not just the harassment of a traveler, but the retaliation against an employee who had tried to speak up for what was right. Jake Thompson's live stream viewer count hit 3,000. "Holy crap," he whispered. "This gate agent just fired the baggage guy for defending the passenger. This is completely out of control." Barbara Stevens, who had been enjoying the drama from the sidelines, finally realized that things had gone too far. "Maybe we should just board the plane and let them sort this out," she said uncertainly. But Derek was beyond reason now. He had committed to his position and couldn't back down without admitting he had been wrong from the beginning. In his mind, this had become a test of authority that he couldn't afford to lose. Ma'am, Derek said, turning back to Simone, "I'm done playing games. You have 30 seconds to leave this gate area voluntarily, or I'm calling security to have you removed." "Remove me for what?" Simone asked. "For having a valid ticket, for being a paying customer, for standing in the boarding line like every other passenger, for trespassing, for fraud, for disrupting airline operations, and for refusing to comply with security directives." Derek reached for his radio to call airport security, but Simone's next words stopped him cold. "Before you make that call, I want you to understand something very clearly. I am Dr. Simone Brooks. I am a board-certified neurosurgeon. I have flown over 1 million miles with this airline. And my husband is a senior investigator with the Federal Aviation Administration." The mention of the FAA hit Derek like a physical blow. The Federal Aviation Administration was the regulatory body that could shut down airlines, fine companies millions of dollars, and end careers with a single investigation. "Your husband works for the FAA." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "My husband investigates exactly the kind of discrimination and passenger abuse you've been demonstrating for the past 20 minutes. Simone continued, her voice steady and dangerous. "And right now he's in this terminal waiting for his own flight." Derek looked around the gate area with new eyes. Dozens of passengers were recording. A live stream with thousands of viewers was broadcasting every word. A baggage handler had been fired for defending proper procedures. And now he was facing the possibility that a federal aviation investigator might be witnessing or would soon learn about everything he had done. But Derek Walsh had spent 6 years building his identity around his authority as a gate supervisor. In his warped thinking, backing down now would be worse than doubling down on his mistakes. "Ma'am, I don't care if your husband works for NASA. You don't have a valid ticket for this flight, and you're not boarding this aircraft." He reached across the counter, and in full view of dozens of recording phones, grabbed Simone's boarding pass from her phone screen and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the gate area like a gunshot. Jake Thompson's live stream exploded with comments. "Oh my God, he just destroyed her ticket. That's federal property. This is insane. Someone call the FBI. Her husband is FAA. This guy is so dead." Simone stared at the torn pieces of paper in Derek's hands. "You just destroyed a federal transportation document. That's a federal crime." "That wasn't a federal transportation document," Derek replied with desperate defiance. That was a piece of paper with fake information on it. No, said a new voice from behind the crowd. That was a legitimate boarding pass issued by Global Airways for a confirmed reservation. Everyone turned to see a tall African-American man in a navy blue suit walking through the gate area. His FAA badge was clearly visible on his belt, and his expression was the kind of controlled fury that comes before official investigations and career-ending consequences. Michael Brooks had arrived at O'Hare early for his own flight and decided to check on his wife's departure status. What he found was his wife being publicly humiliated while her boarding pass was literally torn to pieces by a gate supervisor who had just committed multiple federal violations. Derek Walsh's face went completely white as he realized his Christmas Eve had just become the worst day of his professional life. Before we continue with what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever witnessed someone in authority completely abuse their power? Drop your experiences in the comments below. And make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will restore your faith that sometimes justice comes exactly when you need it most. Jake Thompson's live stream had become a phenomenon in real time. What started as a college student documenting an airport confrontation had exploded into a viral sensation watched by thousands of people across the country. His viewer count had jumped from a few dozen followers to over 4,000 active watchers in less than 30 minutes. Y'all, I cannot believe what I'm witnessing right now, Jake whispered into his phone, keeping the camera trained on the unfolding drama. This gate agent just destroyed this woman's boarding pass, and now a federal agent just showed up. This is about to get absolutely insane. The comments section of his live stream had become a digital wildfire. Retweet this everywhere. Someone record this and post to TikTok. What airline is this? I'm never flying with them again. That woman is a doctor and her husband is federal law enforcement. This gate agent is about to lose everything. Post the airline's customer service number. But Jake's stream wasn't the only documentation capturing every moment. Around gate B12, at least 15 other passengers had their phones out recording from different angles. Some were posting to their own social media accounts. Others were sending videos to friends and family. And several were uploading to TikTok with hashtags like #airportdiscrimination and #racism at O'Hare. Tommy Martinez, despite being fired moments earlier, was still recording on his phone. As an airport employee, he knew that documentation of this incident could be crucial for any investigation. He was capturing not just Derek's actions, but also the complicity of Carmen Rodriguez and the failure of any other Global Airways staff to intervene. This is Tommy Martinez. I'm a baggage handler at O'Hare, he said into his phone camera. I just got fired for trying to stop this supervisor from discriminating against a passenger. Everything you're seeing here violates every training procedure we've ever been taught. His video would later become crucial evidence in multiple investigations. Barbara Stevens, who had been making snide comments throughout the confrontation, suddenly realized that her face and voice had been captured on multiple recordings. In an age where viral videos could destroy reputations overnight, she was beginning to understand that her casual racism might have consequences beyond this gate area. I don't want to be filmed, she said to Jake, trying to position herself outside his camera angle. Too late for that, Jake replied without lowering his phone. This is all going live. You said what you said. Meanwhile, the digital explosion was spreading far beyond O'Hare Airport. Jake's followers were sharing his live stream link across every social media platform. Twitter users were retweeting clips with outraged commentary. TikTok's algorithm had already picked up the hashtags and was pushing related content to millions of feeds. The airline industry's worst nightmare was happening in real time, a discrimination incident being broadcast live to thousands of viewers, with evidence being preserved by multiple independent sources, and with the victim being married to a federal aviation investigator. Global Airways' social media monitoring system began lighting up with alerts. Mentions of the airline were spiking dramatically, and the sentiment analysis was showing overwhelmingly negative responses. Customer service representatives began getting calls from passengers threatening to cancel reservations and switch to competing airlines. At Global Airways headquarters in Atlanta, the crisis management team was scrambling to understand what was happening in Chicago. Initial reports were confusing and contradictory, but the social media monitoring made one thing clear: they had a public relations disaster on their hands. Back at Gate B12, Derek Walsh was beginning to grasp the magnitude of his situation. He could see the phones recording hear Jake's live stream commentary and notice other passengers typing furiously on their devices. But he was too committed to his position to back down now. "Everyone needs to stop recording," Derek announced to the gate area. "This is a security situation involving potential fraud. Filming is not permitted." Actually, said a passenger named Dr. Elizabeth Park, a civil rights attorney traveling home to Washington, "We have every legal right to record interactions in public areas of airports. And as a lawyer, I can tell you that everything I've witnessed here appears to violate multiple federal anti-discrimination statutes." Dr. Park had been quietly observing the situation while recording on her own phone. As someone who specialized in civil rights cases, she recognized exactly what she was witnessing. "Are you threatening me?" Derek asked, his desperation now clearly visible. "I'm informing you of the legal implications of your actions, Doctor," Park replied calmly. "This entire incident has been documented by multiple witnesses, and based on what I've observed, this passenger has grounds for several federal lawsuits." Jake's live stream viewer count hit 5,000. The comments were now coming so fast that they were impossible to read, but the overwhelming sentiment was clear. People were outraged, they wanted justice, and they were sharing the stream everywhere they could. "This is bigger than just one gate agent now," Jake told his audience. "This is about how airlines treat passengers, especially black passengers. Y'all are watching history happen right here." The hashtag #JusticeForDaughterBrooks was beginning to trend, even though most people sharing it didn't yet know Simone's name. The incident had become a symbol of broader issues with airline treatment of minority passengers. Carmen Rodriguez was watching the social media explosion with growing panic. She could see passengers tagging Global Airways in their posts, sharing videos that showed her face and name tag, and calling for accountability. She realized that her compliance with Derek's inappropriate demands had made her a public figure in a viral discrimination case. "Mr. Walsh," she whispered urgently, "maybe we should call customer service now. This is getting out of hand." But Derek was beyond rational decision-making. In his mind, backing down now would be admitting fault in front of thousands of online viewers and dozens of recording passengers. He had convinced himself that doubling down was his only option. "I am following proper security protocols," Derek announced to the crowd and the cameras. "This passenger has failed to provide adequate verification of her ticket, and I have reasonable suspicion that fraud is involved." Michael Brooks had been quietly observing this performance while documenting everything on his own phone. As a federal investigator, he knew the importance of evidence gathering. But he was also a husband watching his wife be humiliated in front of a viral audience. Reasonable suspicion. Michael said, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years of federal law enforcement experience. Based on what specific evidence Derek turned to face the man whose FAA badge meant his career was likely over regardless of how the next few minutes played out. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but this is an airline security matter that doesn't concern you." Michael stepped forward, his badge now clearly visible to everyone in the gate area and to the thousands of people watching the live streams. "Actually," Michael said with the calm precision of someone who had ended careers with official investigations, "I'm Senior Investigator Michael Brooks, Federal Aviation Administration. And discriminating against passengers based on race absolutely concerns me." The digital explosion was about to become a nuclear detonation. Derek Walsh stared at Michael Brooks's FAA badge like a man watching his own execution. In the airline industry, Federal Aviation investigators were the equivalent of the Grim Reaper. They could shut down operations, impose crippling fines, and end careers with a single report. But Derek was too deep in his own delusion to back down. 6 years of unchallenged authority had convinced him that he was untouchable, that his supervisor badge gave him unlimited power over passengers, and that he could talk his way out of any situation. "Sir, I don't care what badge you're carrying," Derek said, his voice taking on the desperate bravado of a cornered animal. "I am the gate supervisor for this flight, and I have the authority to deny boarding to any passenger who cannot provide proper verification." Michael Brooks had investigated dozens of discrimination cases during his tenure with the FAA. He had seen every excuse, every justification, and every attempt to cover up bias with claims of procedure and policy. But he had never witnessed such blatant discrimination happening to his own wife while being broadcast live to thousands of people. "Mr. Walsh," Michael said, reading Derek's name tag, "I need you to explain exactly what verification procedures you've followed with my wife." "Your wife?" Derek's voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "Sir, I can't discuss passenger information with unauthorized individuals. I'm her husband, and I'm a federal aviation investigator. I'm authorized to observe any procedure involving airline passenger treatment." Derek looked around the gate area, seeing the recording phones, the growing crowd, and Jake Thompson's live stream that was now approaching 6,000 viewers. In his warped thinking, admitting error in front of this audience would be worse than continuing to fight a federal investigator. "Sir, I followed standard protocol. This passenger could not provide adequate verification of her ticket purchase. Her boarding pass was not validating in our system. I had reasonable suspicion that fraudulent documents were involved." "Did you call customer service to verify the reservation?" Michael asked. "That wasn't necessary. Our gate computer system is comprehensive." "Did you check alternative reservation systems?" "Our system is the official record. Did you attempt to contact the airline's main reservation center?" "I used my professional judgment based on the information available." Michael Brooks pulled out his own phone and began recording Derek's responses. As a federal investigator, he knew that documented admissions were crucial for any official proceedings. "So you're telling me that when faced with a ticketing discrepancy, you chose not to follow any of the standard verification procedures that Global Airways trains its employees to use?" Derek realized he was being led into admissions that would be used against him, but his ego wouldn't let him stop talking. "I followed the procedures appropriate for the situation," Derek insisted. "When dealing with suspected fraud, we don't waste time on unnecessary verification calls." Suspected fraud based on what evidence? Derek gestured vaguely towards Simone. "The passenger couldn't provide adequate documentation of ticket purchase. She provided a boarding pass confirmation number and offered to show you her frequent flyer account." "What additional documentation did you require, sir? Anyone can fake those things." "Anyone can fake a boarding pass generated by Global Airways' official mobile application." Derek was digging his own grave with every response, but he couldn't stop himself. "Technology makes it easy to manipulate digital documents." Michael turned to address the crowd and the recording devices. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is a clear violation of federal anti-discrimination laws. This employee has admitted that he refused to follow standard verification procedures, instead choosing to assume fraud based on no evidence whatsoever." Jake Thompson's live stream chat exploded with responses. "Document everything. This FAA agent is dismantling him. That gate agent is done. Please tell me someone is recording all of this justice in real time." But Derek Walsh wasn't finished destroying his own career. Faced with a federal investigator methodically documenting his violations, Derek decided to escalate to a level that would transform a discrimination case into a federal criminal matter. "Sir, I don't care what agency you work for. This passenger is not boarding this aircraft, and I'm placing her under citizen's arrest for attempted fraud." The words "citizen's arrest" sent shockwaves through the gate area. Passengers gasped. Dr. Elizabeth Park, the civil rights attorney, immediately began typing notes on her phone. Carmen Rodriguez looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Citizen's arrest. Michael's voice carried the dangerous calm of a federal agent witnessing a crime in progress. Under what authority Illinois law allows citizen's arrest for suspected felonies? Derek replied, pulling out his radio. Airport security. I need officers at gate B12 immediately. I have a passenger in custody for attempted fraud. You have a passenger in custody? Michael asked, his voice incredulous. This passenger is not free to leave until security arrives to process the fraud allegations. That was the moment Derek Walsh crossed the line from discrimination into false imprisonment. By declaring that Simone was not free to leave, he had committed a federal crime in front of thousands of witnesses and multiple recording devices. Tommy Martinez, despite being fired, stepped forward with his phone recording. Mr. Walsh, I've worked here 4 years, and I've never seen you place any passenger under citizen's arrest. I've seen you handle dozens of ticket problems, and you always call customer service. Tommy, you're trespassing. Security will arrest you, too. I'm documenting federal crimes, Tommy replied. Every airport employee is trained that false imprisonment of passengers is a federal offense. Dr. Elizabeth Park approached Michael Brooks and quietly identified herself as a civil rights attorney. Investigator Brooks. I'm an attorney specializing in federal discrimination cases. I've been recording everything. This employee has violated several federal statutes. Thank you, Doctor. Please continue documenting. Derek overheard this exchange and realized that he now faced not just a federal investigator, but also a civil rights attorney who had been recording his actions. But instead of backing down, his desperation drove him to make an even worse decision. Everyone needs to stop recording immediately, Derek announced to the gate area. This is now a security situation involving potential terrorism. The word terrorism caused several passengers to step back in alarm. Others began recording more intensively, realizing that they were witnessing a complete meltdown by an airline employee. Terrorism. Simone spoke for the first time since Michael had arrived, her voice carrying the controlled fury of someone who had been pushed beyond all reasonable limits. You're calling a neurosurgeon a terrorist because she had a first-class ticket, ma'am. Passengers who attempt to board aircraft with fraudulent documents are potential security threats under federal aviation regulations. Michael Brooks had heard enough. Mr. Walsh, you are now making false terrorism accusations against a passenger in addition to false imprisonment and civil rights violations. I strongly recommend that you stop talking and call your supervisor immediately. I am the supervisor, Derek replied with desperate defiance. Then call your manager. Call corporate headquarters. Call someone in your chain of command who can authorize you to hold passengers against their will and make terrorism accusations. Derek reached for his radio again, but his hand was shaking. He was beginning to realize that he had committed multiple federal crimes in front of a federal investigator while being recorded by multiple witnesses and broadcast live to thousands of people. But his ego still wouldn't let him back down. Security. This is Derek Walsh at gate B12. I need immediate assistance with a potential terrorist incident. Passenger attempting to board with fraudulent documents, refusing to comply with security directives. Jake Thompson's live stream viewer count hit 7,000. Y'all, this man just called the FBI's wife a terrorist, he whispered into his phone. This is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. Airport security would arrive within minutes, but they would be coming to arrest Derek Walsh, not Dr. Simone Brooks. Because in the United States of America, falsely imprisoning a passenger while committing civil rights violations in front of a federal investigator is exactly the kind of mistake that ends careers, triggers federal investigations, and sometimes leads to federal prison sentences. Airport security arrived at gate B12 within 3 minutes of Derek's radio call, but what they found wasn't the terrorism incident Derek had reported. Instead, they encountered a gate agent who appeared to be having a complete breakdown, while a crowd of passengers recorded his every word. Officer Lisa Chen was a 15-year veteran of airport security who had responded to thousands of incident calls. She immediately recognized the difference between a legitimate security threat and what appeared to be an employee having a mental health crisis. "What's the situation here?" Officer Chen asked, surveying the scene. Derek rushed toward her with desperate relief. "Officer, I've detained a passenger attempting to board with fraudulent documents. She's been refusing to comply with security directives and may be part of a larger terrorist plot." Officer Chen looked at Simone, who was standing calmly beside her husband, both of them holding federal identification. Nothing about either of them suggested terrorism or security threats. "Sir, I'm going to need you to slow down and explain exactly what happened," Officer Chen said to Derek. "This passenger," Derek pointed at Simone, attempted to board with a fake boarding pass. "When I refused boarding, she became belligerent and threatening. Her accomplice," he pointed at Michael, appeared and began interfering with security procedures. Officer Chen looked at Michael's FAA badge and immediately understood that she was dealing with a federal law enforcement situation that was far above Derek's pay grade. "Sir," she addressed Michael, "you're Federal Aviation Senior Investigator Michael Brooks, FAA. This is my wife, Dr. Simone Brooks. She has a legitimate first-class ticket for this flight, which this employee has refused to honor despite her providing all required documentation." Officer Chen had been trained to diffuse situations, not escalate them, but she had also been trained to recognize when airport employees were violating passenger rights. "Mr. Walsh," she addressed Derek, "have you followed standard verification procedures for ticket discrepancies? I used my professional judgment based on the suspicious circumstances." "Did you call customer service?" Derek hesitated. "That wasn't necessary in this case." Officer Chen looked around the gate area, seeing dozens of passengers recording the interaction, Jake Thompson's live stream still broadcasting to thousands of viewers, and clear evidence that this situation had spiraled completely out of control. "Sir, I need you to explain why you didn't follow standard procedures." "This passenger was clearly attempting fraud," Derek insisted. "Her documents were obviously fake, based on what evidence." Derek gestured wildly. "Her boarding pass wasn't validating in the system. She couldn't provide adequate verification. She became aggressive when questioned." Dr. Elizabeth Park stepped forward and identified herself to Officer Chen. "I'm a civil rights attorney, and I've been recording this entire interaction. This employee has admitted to refusing standard verification procedures, has falsely imprisoned this passenger, and has now made false terrorism accusations." Officer Chen's expression shifted as she realized this wasn't just a ticketing dispute. This was a potential federal civil rights violation that had been documented by multiple witnesses. "Mr. Walsh, I need you to step away from the gate podium." "What, why?" "Sir, based on what I'm observing, you appear to have violated several airline policies and potentially federal laws. I need to separate you from passenger operations while we sort this out." Derek's face went white. "You can't remove me from my post. I'm the gate supervisor." "Sir, you've made terrorism accusations against a federal investigator's wife without any evidence. You've admitted to refusing standard verification procedures, and you've created a disturbance that's being broadcast live to thousands of people. You're being removed from duty pending investigation." Jake Thompson's live stream exploded with comments. "Security is arresting the gate agent. Justice is happening. This is amazing karma in real time. He's getting what he deserves." Carmen Rodriguez, who had been standing silently throughout this confrontation, finally spoke up. "Officer Chen, I need to tell you something. Mr. Walsh instructed me not to follow normal verification procedures. He told me that passengers fitting certain profiles should be flagged for additional scrutiny." This admission sent another shockwave through the gate area. Carmen had just confirmed that Derek's actions were part of a pattern of discriminatory behavior, not isolated errors in judgment. "Ma'am, are you saying you were instructed to racially profile passengers?" Officer Chen asked. Carmen nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "He said we needed to watch for suspicious passengers who might be trying to scam their way into better seats. He specifically mentioned certain demographics. Michael Brooks pulled out his phone and began recording Carmen's testimony. As a federal investigator, he recognized that she was providing evidence of broader discrimination patterns within the airline. Ms. Rodriguez, are you willing to provide a formal statement about these instructions? Yes, sir. I should have spoken up earlier. I knew it was wrong. Derek realized that Carmen's confession had just transformed this from a single incident into evidence of broader discrimination policies that could trigger a federal investigation of the entire airline. Carmen, you don't know what you're saying, Derek said desperately. You're misunderstanding normal security procedures. No, Mr. Walsh. I understand exactly what you told me to do, and I understand why it was wrong. Officer Chen called for additional security backup, recognizing that this situation required more experienced personnel to handle the federal implications. Mr. Walsh, you're being detained pending investigation. You have the right to remain silent. You're arresting me for doing my job. Sir, falsely imprisoning passengers, making false terrorism accusations, and implementing discriminatory policies aren't part of anyone's job description. As Derek was handcuffed and led away from the gate, the crowd of passengers erupted in spontaneous applause. Jake Thompson's live stream viewer count hit 8,000, and the comments were celebrating what felt like justice finally being served. But this was only the beginning. Within hours, Derek's actions would trigger federal investigations, congressional inquiries, and policy changes across the entire airline industry. His 15 minutes of power had cost him everything, while Dr. Simone Brooks and her husband had just sparked a movement for passenger rights that would echo for years. With Derek Walsh in handcuffs and being led away by airport security, the truth of what had really happened began to emerge like water bursting through a cracked dam. Carmen Rodriguez, freed from her supervisor's intimidation, was ready to reveal everything she had witnessed during Derek's tenure as gate supervisor. Officer Chen Carmen said, her voice shaking, but determined, "There's more you need to know. Mr. Walsh has been doing this for months. He specifically targets minority passengers with first-class or business-class tickets." Michael Brooks stepped forward with his phone recording. Ms. Rodriguez, as a federal investigator, I need to document your statement. Are you saying this was a pattern of behavior? Yes, sir. He called it revenue protection. He said people were scamming their way into premium cabins and that we needed to be more aggressive about verification, Dr. Elizabeth Park. The civil rights attorney moved closer to ensure her own recording captured Carmen's testimony. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was evidence of broader discrimination that could impact hundreds or thousands of passengers. Can you be more specific about what Mr. Walsh instructed you to do? Michael asked. Carmen took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would probably end her career, but finally choosing to do the right thing. He told me to flag passengers who didn't look like they belonged in first class. He said to pay special attention to young black passengers, Hispanic families with multiple children, and anyone wearing clothes that didn't seem expensive enough for premium cabins. The crowd of passengers recording this confession reacted with gasps and angry murmurs. Jake Thompson's live stream chat exploded. She's admitting to racial profiling. This is bigger than one incident. How many people have they discriminated against this airline is finished. Federal investigation incoming. Tommy Martinez, who was still recording despite being fired, stepped forward to corroborate Carmen's statement. I can confirm what she's saying. I've seen Mr. Walsh do this to other passengers. Last month, he denied boarding to a black family with 3 children, claiming their tickets were suspicious. Turned out their father was an airline pilot for a different company. Michael Brooks realized he was documenting evidence that would require immediate federal intervention. Mr. Martinez, are you saying there were other incidents of discrimination that weren't reported? Yes, sir. Passengers would complain, but Mr. Walsh would file reports claiming they were disruptive or had invalid documents. The complaints were dismissed because they trusted his word over the passengers. This revelation meant that Derek's actions weren't isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of discrimination that the airline had either ignored or actively covered up. Michael knew that this evidence would trigger investigations not just of Derek, but of Global Airways' entire passenger treatment policies. Dr. Simone Brooks, who had been quietly observing while her husband gathered evidence, finally spoke directly to the cameras and live streams that were documenting everything. "I want everyone watching this to understand something," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years saving lives under pressure. "What happened to me today wasn't just about one racist gate agent. It was about a system that allowed discrimination to flourish unchecked." Jake Thompson's viewer count hit 9,000 as people shared the stream across every social media platform. Simone's words were being broadcast live to a growing audience that included journalists, civil rights activists, and airline industry professionals. "I'm a neurosurgeon," Simone continued. "I've flown millions of miles for conferences, medical emergencies, and patient consultations. I've spent thousands of dollars with this airline. But today I was treated like a criminal because Mr. Walsh looked at my skin color and decided I didn't belong in first class." Officer Chen, who had been listening to these confessions while waiting for federal backup, realized that she was dealing with evidence of crimes far beyond airport security violations. "I need to contact the FBI," she said to Michael Brooks. "Civil rights violations under federal authority require their involvement." "I agree," Michael replied. "I'll also be filing a formal FAA complaint that will trigger a federal investigation of Global Airways' passenger treatment policies." At this moment, Jennifer Taylor, the passenger services manager Derek had mentioned earlier, finally appeared at Gate B12. She had been dealing with other issues across the terminal and was completely unprepared for the scene that greeted her. "What's happening here?" Jennifer asked, seeing Derek in handcuffs, crowds of recording passengers, and what appeared to be a federal law enforcement situation. Ms. Taylor, Officer Chen addressed her. "Your gate supervisor has been arrested for civil rights violations, false imprisonment, and making false terrorism accusations. Your gate agent has provided evidence of broader discrimination patterns within your airline." Jennifer's face went pale as she realized the magnitude of what had occurred. "I need to call corporate immediately," Ma'am Michael Brooks said, showing his FAA badge. "I'm Senior Investigator Brooks with the Federal Aviation Administration. Your airline is about to face a comprehensive federal investigation based on the evidence we've gathered here today." Jennifer pulled out her phone to call Global Airways corporate headquarters, but Jake Thompson's live stream audience was already steps ahead of her. The hashtag #GlobalAirwaysScandal was beginning to trend nationally, joining #Justice for Dr. Brooks as rallying cries for airline accountability. But the most powerful moment came when Dr. Elizabeth Park addressed the cameras directly as a civil rights attorney who had witnessed everything. "What you've seen here today is exactly why we need federal oversight of airline passenger treatment," she said. "This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate discrimination enabled by corporate policies that allowed it to continue unchecked." Within minutes, her statement would be shared by civil rights organizations, legal experts, and passenger advocacy groups across the country. The viral video of Derek's discrimination and arrest would become a catalyst for broader conversations about airline treatment of minority passengers. With Derek Walsh removed from the scene and Carmen Rodriguez providing testimony about discriminatory practices, Officer Chen decided to investigate the original claim that had started this entire confrontation, whether Dr. Simone Brooks actually had a valid ticket for Flight 447. Ms. Rodriguez, Officer Chen said, "I want you to check the reservation system properly using all standard verification procedures. Let's confirm whether Dr. Brooks has a legitimate ticket." Carmen approached the gate computer with trembling hands, knowing that what she was about to reveal would expose Derek's lies to thousands of live stream viewers and dozens of recording passengers. "Officer, let me show you what really happened," Carmen said, logging into the customer service verification system that Derek had refused to access. "When I scan, Doctor, Brooks's confirmation number JH8945. The computer screen immediately displayed a complete reservation record. Passenger Dr. Simone Brooks, flight GA447, Chicago. Ord to Washington, D.C.A., seat 3A. First class status confirmed. Paid frequent flyer, redemption check-in, completed baggage. One checked bag confirmed. Her ticket was valid this entire time, Carmen announced to the crowd. Not only valid, but she's a Platinum Elite member with over 800,000 miles flown this year. Jake Thompson's live stream chat exploded. Her ticket was real. The whole time that gate agent lied about everything he destroyed. A valid boarding pass federal crime for fake reasons. This is going to destroy the airline. Michael Brooks documented the computer screen showing his wife's legitimate reservation. Ms. Rodriguez, you're confirming that standard verification procedures would have immediately showed that my wife had a valid ticket. Yes, sir. It takes less than 30 seconds to verify a reservation through our customer service portal. Mr. Walsh specifically told me not to use that system. Why did he tell you not to verify the reservation? Carmen hesitated, then spoke the truth that would finish Derek's career forever. He said that certain passengers should be made to prove they belong regardless of what the computers show. He said it was about maintaining the integrity of first class. This admission confirmed that Derek's actions weren't based on legitimate security concerns or system errors. They were based on racial bias masked as company policy. Tommy Martinez stepped forward with additional evidence. I can prove this wasn't the first time. I have photos on my phone of other passengers Mr. Walsh denied boarding to even after customer service confirmed their tickets were valid. He showed his phone to Michael Brooks and Officer Chen. The photos showed a young black couple with confirmed business class tickets who had been denied boarding 3 weeks earlier. A Hispanic family with valid first-class tickets who had been forced to take later flights. An elderly black woman who had been accused of fraud, despite traveling on a ticket purchased by her daughter's law firm. This is a clear pattern of discrimination, Dr. Elizabeth Park observed. Mr. Walsh was deliberately targeting minority passengers with valid tickets, using his position to humiliate them, regardless of their legal right to travel. Michael Brooks was documenting everything for his federal report. Ms. Rodriguez, I need to know how many passengers were affected by these discriminatory practices. I don't have exact numbers, Carmen replied. But over the 6 months I've worked with Mr. Walsh, I'd estimate at least 30 or 40 passengers were denied boarding or subjected to excessive scrutiny based on these criteria. The scope of Derek's discrimination was far broader than anyone had realized. Dozens of passengers had been illegally denied boarding, humiliated in public, or forced onto later flights because of Derek Walsh's personal biases. Officer Chen was coordinating with FBI agents who were en route to take custody of Derek and begin a formal federal investigation. Mr. Brooks, this appears to be a significant civil rights violation that will require federal prosecution. Agreed, Michael replied. The FAA will also be conducting a comprehensive investigation of Global Airways passenger treatment policies and training procedures. Jennifer Taylor, the passenger services manager, was on the phone with Global Airways corporate headquarters trying to explain how a simple ticketing issue had become a federal investigation broadcast live to thousands of people. Yes, sir. The passenger's ticket was valid the entire time, she said into her phone. The gate supervisor destroyed legitimate documents and made false accusations. Yes, sir, it's all on video. Yes, sir, federal agents are involved. Jake Thompson's live stream viewer count had reached 10,000, making it one of the most watched real-time discrimination incidents in social media history. News outlets were beginning to pick up the story, and #Justice for Dr. Brooks was trending nationally. But the most damaging evidence was yet to come. Carmen Rodriguez, realizing that full cooperation was her only chance at avoiding criminal charges, revealed the final piece of information that would destroy Derek's life completely. Officer Chen. "There's something else you need to know," Carmen said. "Mr. Walsh has been taking money from passengers he upgrades after denying boarding to legitimate ticket holders. He's been pocketing upgrade fees and falsifying reports to cover it up." This revelation transformed Derek's discrimination from a civil rights violation into federal fraud. He hadn't just been denying boarding to minority passengers out of racism. He had been stealing their seats to sell upgrades and pocket the money. Michael Brooks smiled grimly as he realized that Derek Walsh hadn't just destroyed his career with racial discrimination. He had committed multiple federal crimes that would send him to prison for years. The system check was complete. Dr. Simone Brooks's ticket had been legitimate all along. Derek Walsh was a criminal who had used his position to discriminate against and steal from innocent passengers, and justice was about to be served in the most comprehensive way possible. FBI agents arrived at Gate B12 within 20 minutes of Officer Chen's call, but by then Derek Walsh's destruction was already complete and being broadcast live to over 12,000 viewers on Jake Thompson's viral live stream. What they found was a discrimination case so well documented and confessed to so thoroughly that building a federal prosecution would be simpler than most parking tickets. Special Agent Maria Santos took custody of Derek from airport security, reading him his Miranda rights while thousands of people watched online. Derek's face had gone from defiant to desperate to completely defeated as he finally understood that his 15 minutes of power had cost him everything he would ever have. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Santos said, clearly, ensuring the recording devices captured every word. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Derek tried to speak, probably to make more excuses or offer more justifications, but his attorney would later thank Agent Santos for cutting him off before he could dig his legal grave any deeper. Jake Thompson provided live commentary to his audience. "Y'all, they're arresting this man for federal civil rights violations, fraud, and false imprisonment. This is what happens when racism meets consequences in real time." Michael Brooks was coordinating with Agent Santos to ensure all evidence was properly preserved. Agent Santos: "I have documented confessions from the complicit employee witness testimony from other staff members and video evidence of the violations in progress." "Thank you, Investigator Brooks. We'll need formal statements from all witnesses, but based on what I'm seeing here, this appears to be a clear-cut case of federal civil rights violations." Carmen Rodriguez was cooperating fully with authorities, providing detailed information about Derek's discriminatory practices in exchange for consideration in her own potential charges. Agent Santos: "I can provide names and dates for at least 30 passengers who were discriminated against over the past 6 months. This cooperation would save Carmen's career and keep her out of prison, though she would face disciplinary action and mandatory bias training." Tommy Martinez, despite being fired earlier in the evening, was being interviewed as a key witness. Agent Martinez: "I need to document your statement about the pattern of discrimination you observed." "Ma'am, I watched Mr. Walsh target minority passengers for months. I tried to speak up today and he fired me for it. But I'm glad I said something even if it cost me my job. Actually, Tommy's job would be restored within 48 hours, along with back pay and a commendation for standing up to discrimination. Global Airways would also face whistleblower protection violations for Derek's retaliation against him. Dr. Elizabeth Park was providing expert legal context for the recording devices and live stream audience. "What we witnessed here represents multiple federal crimes, civil rights violations under Title VI. False imprisonment, filing false terrorism reports, and federal fraud through the embezzlement scheme." Jennifer Taylor was frantically trying to manage a crisis that had already spiraled completely beyond her control. Global Airways corporate headquarters was demanding minute-by-minute updates on a situation that was destroying the company's reputation in real time. Ms. Taylor, Agent Santos addressed her Global Airways will be receiving federal subpoenas within 24 hours for all employee records, training materials, and complaint files related to passenger discrimination. Agent Santos. I want to make clear that Global Airways does not condone any form of discrimination. Jennifer replied, reading from talking points provided by corporate attorneys. Ma'am, we have documented evidence that discriminatory practices were occurring for months without any corrective action. The FBI will be investigating whether this represents corporate negligence or willful blindness. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Simone Brooks was finally able to board her flight home. Agent Santos personally escorted her to the jetway, while the passengers who had witnessed her humiliation gave her a standing ovation. Dr. Brooks. Agent Santos said, "I want you to know that what happened here tonight will result in federal prosecutions and policy changes that will help protect other passengers from similar discrimination. Thank you, Agent Santos. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." As Simone walked down the jetway to her long-delayed seat in first class, Jake Thompson provided final commentary to his live stream audience. "Y'all, we just watched a racist gate agent destroy his entire life in real time. Dr. Brooks is finally getting on her plane. Her husband just triggered a federal investigation and justice has been served." The live stream ended with over 15,000 total viewers, but the recorded videos would be watched millions of times in the coming days. Global Airways issued their first public statement within 2 hours. "We are cooperating fully with federal investigators regarding tonight's incident at Chicago O'Hare. The employee involved has been terminated, and we are reviewing all policies to ensure this never happens again. But the damage was already done." Global Airways' scandal was trending nationally. Customer service phones were flooded with cancellation requests, and stock prices would open Monday morning down 12%. Derek Walsh would face federal charges including civil rights violations, fraud, false imprisonment, and making false terrorism reports. Legal experts predicted a sentence of 3 to 5 years in federal prison. Carmen Rodriguez would receive probation and community service after cooperating with investigators and providing evidence against Derek. Tommy Martinez would become a symbol of standing up to workplace discrimination, receiving job offers from multiple airlines and advocacy groups. But the biggest immediate consequence was the message sent to airline employees across the country. Discrimination against passengers would result in federal prosecution, career destruction, and viral humiliation. Christmas Eve 2024 would be remembered as the night when airline discrimination finally faced real consequences broadcast live to the world. By Christmas morning, Jake Thompson's live stream of Derek Walsh's discrimination and arrest had exploded across every social media platform, becoming one of the most watched examples of real-time justice in Internet history. The video had been viewed over 2 million times, shared hundreds of thousands of times, and spawned countless reaction videos, news segments, and social justice discussions. Justice for Dr. Brooks was trending worldwide, joined by #Global Airways Scandal and #Airline Accountability. The hashtags had become rallying cries for passenger rights and examples of how social media could force immediate consequences for discrimination. Jake woke up Christmas morning to discover that his follower count had jumped from 2,000 to over 100,000 overnight. News outlets were requesting interviews. Social justice organizations wanted to feature his documentation of the incident, and airline passenger advocacy groups were using his video as evidence for policy changes. "I never expected this to blow up like this," Jake told CNN in a phone interview. "I was just documenting something that seemed wrong. But I'm glad it's forcing people to pay attention to how airlines treat passengers." The video's impact went far beyond social media metrics. Major news networks picked up the story, with CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox News running segments about airline discrimination. The Washington Post published an investigative piece about passenger profiling in the airline industry. The New York Times ran an editorial calling for federal oversight of airline customer service practices. But the most powerful responses came from ordinary passengers sharing their own experiences of airline discrimination. The hashtag #HadMyAirlineStory became a collection point for thousands of travelers who had faced similar treatment but hadn't had the benefit of viral documentation. The internet's response wasn't limited to support for Dr. Brooks. The crowd also turned its attention to other people involved in the incident, particularly Barbara Stevens, the passenger in the pink tracksuit, who had made discriminatory comments throughout the confrontation. Barbara Stevens discovered Christmas morning that she had been identified online through facial recognition and cross-referencing with social media posts. Her employer, a high-end real estate firm in Naperville, was flooded with negative reviews and customer complaints demanding her termination. By noon on Christmas Day, Luxury Homes Naperville had terminated Barbara's employment and issued a public statement. "We do not tolerate discriminatory behavior from our employees. Ms. Stevens no longer represents our company." The speed of Barbara's consequences became another viral story demonstrating how quickly social media accountability could destroy careers built on discrimination. Global Airways faced its own viral reckoning. The airline's social media accounts were flooded with customer complaints, video responses, and demands for comprehensive policy changes. Customer service phone lines were overwhelmed with callers threatening to cancel reservations and switch to competitors. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Global Airways' stock price dropped 15% in after-hours trading, wiping out hundreds of millions in market value. Travel booking sites reported a surge in cancellations for Global Airways reservations, with customers specifically citing the discrimination video as their reason for switching airlines. Industry analysts predicted that the viral video could cost Global Airways between $50 to $100 million in lost revenue and legal settlements, making Derek Walsh's 15 minutes of power one of the most expensive employment decisions in airline history. But the most meaningful responses came from civil rights organizations and passenger advocacy groups who recognized the broader importance of the documented discrimination. The NAACP issued a statement. Dr. Brooks' experience represents the discrimination faced by countless travelers who don't have the benefit of viral documentation. This incident must trigger comprehensive reforms in airline passenger treatment. The Travel Justice Coalition announced they were using Jake Thompson's video as evidence in their petition for federal passenger rights legislation. This video proves that discrimination in airline travel is real, pervasive, and requires immediate federal intervention. Airlines for America. The Industry Trade Association was forced to issue their own statement. While this incident does not represent the values of our industry, we are committed to working with federal authorities to ensure all passengers are treated with dignity and respect. The viral response also sparked international attention, with news outlets in Europe, Asia, and Australia covering the story as an example of American airline customer service problems. Some international airlines began using the incident in their own marketing, promoting themselves as alternatives to American carriers. By the end of Christmas Day, Jake Thompson's video had been viewed over 5 million times across all platforms. Derek Walsh had become a worldwide symbol of workplace discrimination and abuse of power. Dr. Simone Brooks had become an inspiration for standing up to injustice with dignity and grace. But most importantly, the viral response had created unstoppable momentum for changes in how airlines treat passengers, proving that in the age of smartphones and social media, discrimination would no longer go unnoticed or unpunished. The federal case against Derek Walsh moved with unprecedented speed, driven by overwhelming evidence and political pressure from the viral video that had documented his crimes in real time. By New Year's Day, federal prosecutors had filed a comprehensive indictment that would serve as a template for future airline discrimination cases. The charges were extensive and carried serious prison-time civil rights violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Derek had violated Dr. Brooks's constitutional rights under color of state authority, using his position as a gate agent to discriminate based on race. Maximum penalty, 10 years federal prison. False imprisonment under 18 U.S.C. Section 1201. Derek had unlawfully detained Dr. Brooks against her will without legal justification. Maximum penalty: 5 years federal prison. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Investigation revealed Derek had been stealing upgrade fees and falsifying airline records for months. Maximum penalty: 20 years federal prison per incident. Making false terrorism reports under 18 U.S.C. Section 1038. Derek's false claims about terrorism and security threats carried their own federal penalties. Maximum penalty: 8 years federal prison. Federal prosecutors made clear they intended to seek maximum sentences as a deterrent to other airline employees who might consider similar discrimination. Mr. Walsh's actions represent a particularly egregious abuse of power, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Martinez in her press conference. He used his position of authority to discriminate against passengers based on race while stealing money through fraudulent schemes. The federal government will prosecute these crimes to the fullest extent of the law. Derek's defense attorney attempted to negotiate a plea bargain, but prosecutors refused any deal that didn't include significant prison time. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, and public pressure demanded accountability. The FBI investigation expanded far beyond Derek's individual actions, uncovering broader patterns of discrimination within Global Airways. Federal agents interviewed dozens of passengers who had been subjected to similar treatment, building a comprehensive case of civil rights violations that went far beyond a single employee. Carmen Rodriguez received immunity in exchange for her complete cooperation, providing federal investigators with detailed information about Derek's instructions to racially profile passengers. Her testimony would become crucial evidence in both Derek's prosecution and the broader investigation of Global Airways. Ms. Rodriguez's cooperation has revealed the scope of discriminatory practices that were occurring under Mr. Walsh's supervision, Agent Santos explained to reporters. Her testimony shows this wasn't isolated incidents, but a pattern of behavior that affected dozens of passengers. Tommy Martinez became a key witness in the federal case, his documentation of Derek's retaliation adding additional charges to the indictment. The Department of Labor also filed whistleblower protection violations against Global Airways for Derek's illegal firing of Tommy. Mr. Martinez showed extraordinary courage in speaking up for passenger rights, despite knowing it would cost him his job, said Labor Department spokesman Richard Chen. His actions embody the kind of workplace integrity we need to protect. Global Airways faced its own federal investigation that would dwarf Derek's individual prosecution. The Department of Transportation launched a comprehensive review of the airline's passenger treatment policies, training procedures, and complaint handling processes. The DOT's investigation revealed troubling patterns. Over 200 discrimination complaints in the previous 2 years that had been dismissed without proper investigation. Training materials that included coded language, encouraging enhanced scrutiny of certain passenger demographics. Performance metrics that rewarded gate agents for denying boarding to passengers, creating financial incentives for discrimination. Management oversight, failures that allowed Derek's behavior to continue for months, despite multiple complaints. Our investigation has revealed failures at every level of Global Airways organization, said Transportation Secretary Williams in a televised announcement. These failures enabled discrimination and violated the civil rights of countless passengers. Global Airways faced federal penalties that would fundamentally change their operations. A $25 million civil rights settlement with the Department of Justice, the largest airline discrimination penalty in U.S. history. Mandatory federal oversight of all passenger treatment policies for 5 years with an independent monitor reporting directly to the DOT. Complete retraining of all customer-facing employees using federal civil rights curriculum. Implementation of new complaint handling procedures with federal oversight. Compensation for all passengers who could document discrimination by Derek Walsh or other employees following similar practices. The legal consequences extended to other airlines as well. The Federal Aviation Administration announced new regulations requiring comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all airline employees, regular auditing of passenger treatment practices, and federal reporting of all discrimination complaints. The incident involving Dr. Brooks has exposed weaknesses in our oversight of airline passenger treatment, said FAA Administrator Roberts. These new regulations will ensure that what happened to Dr. Brooks never happens to another passenger. Congress also responded with proposed legislation. The Airline Passenger Rights Act, introduced in both the House and Senate, would create a federal passenger bill of rights with criminal penalties for airline employee discrimination. Every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race, ethnicity, or appearance, said Senator Johnson, the bill's primary sponsor. This legislation will give passengers legal recourse and create real consequences for discrimination. Derek Walsh's case became a watershed moment in federal civil rights enforcement, demonstrating that discrimination in federally regulated industries would face swift and severe consequences. Legal experts predicted that his prosecution would deter similar behavior across the transportation industry. The Walsh case shows that civil rights violations will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law, said Georgetown law professor Sandra Williams. No one can claim they didn't know discrimination has consequences anymore. By February, Derek Walsh accepted a plea agreement, 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, $50,000 in restitution, and a permanent ban from working in the transportation industry. Even his guilty plea was broadcast live, showing him accepting responsibility for crimes that had been watched by millions of people. The legal consequences of Derek's 15 minutes of power would echo through the airline industry for years, creating new protections for passengers and new accountability for employees who chose discrimination over dignity. Christmas morning in the Brooks household began not with the chaos of unwrapped presents and excited children, but with quiet reflection on how a routine flight had become a catalyst for nationwide change. Dr. Simone Brooks sat in her kitchen, still in her robe, watching news coverage of Derek Walsh's arrest, while her coffee grew cold in her hands. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma bounded down the stairs, completely oblivious to the fact that her mother had become a national symbol overnight. "Mommy, you're home. Did Santa come? Can we open presents?" Simone set down her phone and pulled Emma into a warm hug, remembering why she had been so desperate to get home for Christmas in the first place. "Yes, sweetheart, Santa came. And yes, we can open presents. But first, I need to tell you about something that happened to Mommy yesterday." Michael Brooks joined them in the kitchen, already dressed and fielding calls from federal prosecutors, civil rights attorneys, and news outlets wanting statements about the ongoing investigation. But when he saw his wife and daughter together, he set his phone aside. Some moments were more important than federal cases. Emma Simone said gently, "Yesterday, Mommy was treated badly by someone who didn't think I belonged somewhere I had every right to be. It made me sad and angry, but I stood up for myself, and Daddy helped make sure the person who was mean to me faced consequences." Emma processed this with the straightforward logic of an 8-year-old. Was he mean to you because you're black? The question hung in the air with the weight of generations. Simone had hoped to protect Emma from these conversations for a few more years, but Derek Walsh's actions had forced a teachable moment that couldn't be avoided. "Yes, sweetheart, I think that's exactly why he was mean to me. But you know what? When people are mean for bad reasons, there are lots of good people who will stand up and say it's wrong. Like Daddy, and like the other people at the airport who recorded what happened and spoke up for me. And like you when you see someone being treated unfairly." Michael sat down beside them, marveling at how his wife could turn a traumatic experience into a lesson about courage and justice. "Emma, what your mom did yesterday was very brave. She didn't yell or get angry. She stood up for herself with dignity, and she helped make things better for other people who might face the same treatment." Emma considered this seriously. "Is the mean man in jail?" Yes, Michael replied. He's in jail and he's going to face consequences for being mean to people. Good, Emma said with 8-year-old certainty. Being mean to people because of how they look is wrong. They spent Christmas morning opening presents, playing with new toys, and enjoying the kind of family time that Simone had been desperate to reach when Derek Walsh first refused to honor her boarding pass. But throughout the day, Simone found herself thinking about the broader impact of what had happened. By afternoon, her phone was filled with messages from colleagues, friends, and complete strangers who had seen the viral video. Medical school classmates reached out to offer support. Hospital administrators wanted to commend her for handling the situation with such grace. Civil rights organizations asked if she would consider becoming a spokesperson for airline passenger rights. But the message that moved her most came from a young black medical student at Howard University. Dr. Brooks, watching you stand up to that gate agent with such dignity gave me strength to report discrimination I faced during my surgery rotation. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone has authority over us. That evening, as Emma played with her Christmas toys and Michael reviewed federal case files, Simone made a decision that would define the rest of her involvement in the growing movement for passenger rights. I want to start a foundation, she told Michael. Something to help travelers who face discrimination but don't have the resources or connections to fight back. Michael looked up from his legal documents. Tell me more. Most people who face what I faced yesterday don't have a husband who works for the FAA. They don't have the money for lawyers or the platform to make their voices heard. They just accept the mistreatment and move on because they feel powerless. Simone had been thinking about this all day, realizing that Derek Walsh's attack on her had revealed a broader problem that affected thousands of travelers who would never have the benefit of viral documentation or federal investigation. The Foundation could provide legal assistance, document discrimination patterns, and advocate for policy changes, she continued. We could turn what happened to me into something that helps protect other people. Michael smiled, recognizing the determination that had gotten his wife through medical school and residency. What would you call it, Equal Skies Foundation? Simone said without hesitation. Because everyone deserves to travel with dignity regardless of how they look or where they're going. That conversation on Christmas night would lead to the creation of one of the most effective passenger rights organizations in the country. Within 6 months, the Equal Skies Foundation would be providing legal assistance to discrimination victims, publishing annual reports on airline treatment patterns, and successfully advocating for federal legislation. But on Christmas night, it was just a family sitting together talking about how to turn a painful experience into positive change. As Emma fell asleep between her parents while they watched a Christmas movie, Simone reflected on how Derek Walsh's 15 minutes of power had inadvertently created something far more valuable, a national conversation about dignity, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right. You know, she told Michael as they carried Emma to her bedroom, in a strange way, I'm almost grateful this happened. Not for the humiliation or the trauma, but for the opportunity to make things better for other people. That's why I love you, Michael replied. Most people would want revenge. You want reform. The Brooks family went to sleep on Christmas night knowing that Derek Walsh's moment of hatred had been transformed into a movement for justice, and that sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is refusing to let it make you bitter. 6 months after Derek Walsh's viral discrimination and arrest, the changes triggered by his 15 minutes of power had transformed airline passenger treatment across the entire industry. Derek received 18 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to civil rights violations, fraud, and false imprisonment. His case became a legal precedent used in civil rights prosecutions across the transportation industry. Global Airways paid $3. $2 million in federal fines and civil settlements, implemented comprehensive bias training for all employees, and now operates under federal oversight that will continue for 5 years. Carmen Rodriguez received probation and community service after cooperating with investigators, while Tommy Martinez was promoted to passenger relations supervisor and became a national advocate for employee whistleblower protections. Dr. Simone Brooks's Equal Skies Foundation has provided legal assistance to over 200 travelers facing discrimination, successfully advocated for federal passenger rights legislation, and published groundbreaking research on airline treatment patterns. Jake Thompson's viral documentation became a case study in how social media can drive immediate accountability for discrimination, inspiring a generation of digital activists to document injustice wherever they encounter it. Every Christmas Eve, the Brooks family remembers that moment at Gate B12 not as trauma, but as proof that standing up to injustice with dignity and courage can change everything. Derek Walsh's attempt to humiliate one passenger because of her race ultimately created a movement that made air travel safer and more respectful for millions of people. Sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is transforming it into hope, one viral video and one federal investigation at a time. If this story moved you, I want you to do something right now. Hit that like button to show your support for justice and equality. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories that matter. But most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with friends who faced discrimination. Share it with family members who need to understand that change is possible when good people stand up to injustice. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you witnessed someone standing up for what's right. Tell me about moments when you saw justice served, or when someone's courage inspired you to be better. Your stories matter, and together we can make sure that Derek Walsh's moment of hatred becomes a lasting movement for respect and human dignity. Remember, justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when ordinary people decide they won't accept extraordinary injustice. Dr. Simone Brooks showed us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to back down, even when you're standing alone. But as we saw, she wasn't really alone. Good people were watching, recording, and ready to speak up when it mattered most. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the kind of person who believes everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right. Keep your phone ready to document injustice, and never forget that your voice matters in the fight for equality and respect.